ॐ ब्रह्मानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वधी साक्षिभूतम् बाधीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Shivam friends, today we will be reading chapter 29 onwards, and in this chapter Leela's life as Arundhati is described, so we should now continue our reading. Vasishta is speaking. Then the two goddesses sat on a cooling village seat. Much like the two states of joy and liberation meet in the tranquil spirit of the man knowing the divine spirit. By this time, Leela had become personified to the form of pure consciousness through her knowledge of meditation. She had become a seer of the three times presenting themselves before her. She remembered the whole course of her past life and derived pleasure relating the events of her former life and death. Leela said, "By your favor, O goddess, and by sight of this place, I recollect all that I did and thought of in my past. Here I grew up to old age, and here I withered and become lean and thin as a skeleton. I was a Brahmani here and had my body scratched by dried sacrificial grass. I was the legal wife of my lord and producer of his race. I was employed milking cattle and churning curd. I had been mother of many sons and a kind hostess to my guests. I was devoted to the service of the gods, Brahmins, and good people, and rubbed my body with cow milk and ghee. I cleaned the frying pans and boiling kettles of the house. I boiled food daily with a single bracelet of glass and one of conch shell on my wrist. I served my father, mother, brother, daughters, and sons, in-laws with their daily meals, working all day and night. My body was emaciated like that of a domestic servant. Haste and hasten were the words I used to repeat to myself. Being so busy, I was silly and ignorant. Although I was the wife of a Brahmin, I never wondered, not even in a dream, about what I was and what was this world. Fully engaged in the collection of fuel, cow dung, and sacrificial wood and vegetables, I became emaciated in my body, which was wrapped in a worn out blanket. I used to pick out worms from the ears of the milk cow and was prompt to water the garden of greens with watering pots in hand. Every day I used to go to the lake and get fresh green grass to feed my tender cows. I used to wash and clean the house every morning and paint the doorway with the white tints of pasted and powdered rice. This is called bundi. I had to correct my servants with gentle rebukes and tell them to keep within their bounds like the waves in the rivers. With my infirm body and ears shaking like dried leaves and supporting myself on a stick, I lived here under the dread of old age. As she was speaking in this manner and walking with Saraswati about in the village in the valley of the mountain, she was astonished to see her former seats of pleasure, and she showed them to the goddess. This was my flowery tree garden, decorated by these stone patla plants and this was my garden aglow of flowering ashokas. This is the bank of the pond where the cows were loosely tied to the trees. This is my pet calf Karnika, which in my absence has refrained from eating the leaves. This is my watering woman, now so weak and dirty in her appearance, her eyes daubed in tears from weeping these 8 days in my absence. This, O goddess, is the place where I used to eat and sit, and where I slept and walked. These are the places where I gave and received the things from my attendants. This is my eldest son, Jeshta Sarma, weeping in the house. That is my milk cow, now grazing on the grassy plain in the forest. I see this portico and these windows, once as dear to me as my own self, smeared with the dry powder of the spring holy festival. I see these pulpy gourds planted with my own hands and dear to me as myself, now spreading themselves over the oven area. I see my relatives wearing Rudraksh beads, whom before had been the bonds of my life, carrying fuel for fire, eyes tearing from the smoke. I see that stony shore pelting its pebbles against force of the waves that baffle the beach, now covered by bushes. The green meadows were full of the leafy plants, dewdrops on their tips. The plains were whitened from hailstones falling on them in showers. The midday was covered by sunbeams like a white mist of frost. The tree groves resounded with humming of bees fluttering about clustering flowers. The, the blooming plaza, glowing like reddish coral, covered trees and land with heaps of crimson flowers. Fruit was flowing in the village stream, carried from shore to shore, and rustic lads loudly jumbled together, eager to lay hold on them. The cool, shady beach of the stream was strewn with pebbles, washed and carried away by the currents, and covered by leaves falling from the trees. There I see the altar of my house, so beautifully decorated with flowering vines, clusters of fruits and flowers hanging over its windows. Here lived my husband, whose life in its aerial form has fled to the sky and became lord of the earth, reaching the surrounding seas. I remember how he had fostered the fond wish of obtaining royal dignity, and how ardently he looked forward to its attainment. I see, O goddess, his royal dignity of 8 days, which had seemed to be so long in duration. I see the soul of my husband in the same form as his kingly state, residing in the empty space of this house, invisible to all like the air in the sky, and like the odors borne by the winds. It is in this empty space that his soul is contained within the form of a thumb that contains in its bosom the whole extent of my lord's realm, stretching thousands of leagues in its circumference. I also see the spacious kingdom of my lord in the space of my consciousness, which, by the miraculous power of God, called illusion, makes room for thousands of mountains. O goddess, now I wish to see the earthly city of my Lord again. Let us therefore turn our course that way, as no place is distant to the resolute. Vasishtha said. Having said so, Leela bowed down to Saraswati and entered the shrine. Then, like a bird, she flew into the air with the goddess. It was the region devoid of darkness, as fair as a sea of moonlight. Then it became as blue as the body of Narayan, and as bright as the back of a locust. They passed above the regions of the clouds and winds. Then beyond the spheres of the orbits of the sun and moon, they passed beyond the path of the North Star and the limits of the circuits of the Sadhya deities, spiritual masters, and other celestial beings. From there they ascended to the higher heavens of Brahma and the Tushit divinities, then upward to the spheres of Golok, and from there the world of Shiva and to the sphere of the departed souls of the dead. Passing beyond the spheres of embodied living beings and of the bodiless souls of the dead, they proceeded far and farther to the unknown regions of empty space. Having passed the ethereal sphere, they saw nothing there except the sun, moon, and the stars shining below them. There was only a deep darkness to be seen, filling the whole void of space and appearing like the basin of the waters of universal deluge, and as compact as the impenetrable cavity of a rock. Leela said, "Tell me, O goddess, what happened to the light of the sun and other stars? Where did this darkness, dense like a forest, dense like a fist, come from?" The goddess replied, "You have arrived at a place so remote from the spheres of heaven that the light of the stars can never reach it. Just like one at the bottom of a deep dark pit is unable to see the light of a firefly flitting over it, so sunlight is invisible to one behind the great belt of heaven." Leela said, "Such a great distance we have come. The great luminary of the sun appears as small as an atom below. Tell me, mother, what sort of a place lies beyond this region, and how can we get there after traversing this gloomy expanse?" Saraswati said, "Behind this is the great pole of the universe that is scattered with innumerable nebular stars like particles of dust." Vasishtha said, "As they were talking in this manner, they glided imperceptibly to that pole, like a bee saunters over a solitary hut on the height of a mountain. They were at no pains to come down from that precipice, as there is no pain to effect what must certainly come to pass, even though it appears difficult at first. They saw the system of the universe laid naked to their sight, just as a bold navigator beholds a world exposed to his view beyond the wide expanse of waters. They saw the watery expanse to be 10 times greater than the earth and enveloping like the crust of a walnut. Then there is a latent heat that is 10 times as great as the water, and the surrounding air is as much greater than the water, and then the all-encompassing space of which there is no end. There is no beginning, middle, or end to that infinite space. It produces nothing, like a barren woman of her offsprings. It is only an extended expanse, infinite, calm, and without beginning, middle, or end, situated in the Supreme Spirit. It immensely Its immensity is as immeasurable as a stone flung with full force from its top. It is impossible for a Garud bird, flying with all its might at full speed over the course of an entire kalpage, to reach from one end to the other. With this, chapter 29 ends, and in chapter 30, Vasishta describes the universe, the Brahman. Vasishta is speaking. Within a moment, they pass beyond the regions of the earth, fire, water, and space, and tracks of the 10 planetary spheres. They reach boundless space from where the universe appears like an egg. Under its walls, they saw millions of luminous particles floating in the air, like innumerable bubbles floating on the waters of the unlimited ocean of the sphere of consciousness. Some particles were going downward, and others rising upward, some turning round, and others appeared to their understanding to remain fixed and immovable. These different motions were only apparent as they saw them from different sides. Here there were no ups or downs, no upside or below, and no going forward or backward. Here there are no directions as men know. There is only one indefinite space in nature, as there is only one consciousness in all beings. Yet everything moves in its own way, just like wayward children take their own course. Ram said, "Tell me, O sage, why do we refer to up and down, forward and backward if there is no such thing in space and nature?" Vasishtha said, "There is only one space enveloping all things. The world seen in the infinite and indiscernible womb of emptiness are like worms moving on the surface of water. All these bodies that move about in the world by their lack of freedom are thought to be up and down related to our position on earth. So when there are ants on an earthen hill ball, all its sides are reckoned below that are under their feet, and those as above which are over their backs. Such is this ball of earth is in one of these worlds, covered by vegetables and animals moving on it, and by gods, demons, and men walking upon it. It is also covered by cities, towns, and mountains, and their inhabitants and productions, like a walnut by itself. Like elephants appearing as pygmies in the Vindhya mountains, these worlds appear as particles in the vast expanse of space. Everything everywhere is produced from and exists in space. It is always all in all things, which are contained like particles in it. Such is the pure empty space of divine consciousness, which, like an ocean of light, contains these innumerable worlds which are forever revolving in it, like the countless waves of the sea. Some of these are hollow within, and others are as dark as the darkness in the end of a calp age. They are all moving about in the ocean of emptiness, like the waves of the sea. Some are forever whirling about with a jarring noise that is neither heard or known to anybody. It is like the motion of men addicted by their nature to earthly pursuits. Some worlds are growing in form as if they were newly created. In their development, they are like the sprouts from seeds newly sown in the ground. Some are melting away like icicles in heat, or like the mountains that melt at the dissolution of the world from burning sun and heavenly fire. Others have been continually falling. Others have been cut. Sorry. Others have been continually falling downward without reaching any ground until at last they dwindle and melt into divine intellect. Others are fixed in the air like minuscule animals in waters that are moved to and fro by currents but without any sign of motion or sensation in them. Again, nothing is stable in nature. Everything is as changing as people alter and add to the acts and customs enjoined in the Vedas and scriptures. There are other Brahmas and other patriarchs, and many Vishnus and many Indras, one after the other. We have different kings of men and sometimes no ruler of them. Some in this mountain multiform creations are like men or lords of others, and some are creeping and crooked like living beings on earth. Some kinds are as plenty as the water of the ocean, and others have become extinct. Some are as hard as solid stones, and others are as soft as poor insects and worms. Some are of godly figures, such as the giants, while others are of puny human forms. Some are quite blind and are suited to darkness, others are suited to light, some to both. Some are born as gnats sucking the juice figs, others are empty within and fly about and feed upon the air. The world is filled with creatures beyond the conceptions of even yogis. Even we can't form a guess of all the beings that fill infinite space. This world is despair for these living beings, but the great emptiness that spreads beyond is so extensive that the gods Vishnu and others are unable to measure it, even if they were to traverse it for the whole of their lives. Every one of these ethereal globes is encircled by a belt resembling a golden bracelet, and each has an attractive power like the earth to attract other objects. I have told you all about the grandeur of this universe to my best knowledge. I have no knowledge or power to describe anything beyond this. There are many other large worlds, unseen by others, rolling through the immense space of vacuum like giddy yaksh demons revel in the dark and dismal deserts and forests. With this, chapter 30 ends, and let us take chapter 31. In this chapter, Leela and Saraswati arrive on earth. Vasishtha said, after having seen the worlds in their aerial journey, the ladies arrived on earth and quickly entered King Padma's inner apartment. There they saw the king's dead body lying in the state under heaps of flowers. Leela's spiritual body sitting beside the corpse. It was the dead of night and the residents had fallen into sound sleep one by one. The room was perfumed with the incense of resin, camphor, sandalwood, and saffron. Leela, seeing the house of her late husband and wishing to enter it, came to his tomb in her assumed body. Then she passed through the fictitious, spacious palace of her lord by breaking out of the confines of her body, and had that in yoga terminology are called earthly and worldly environment. Then, with the goddess, she went again to the bright and spacious temple of the world and quickly entered. She saw her husband's imaginary world like a dirty and mossy pool, just like a lioness beholds a mountain cave covered by darkness and clouds. Then the two goddesses entered that empty world with their airy bodies, like weak ants make their passage through the hard crust of the wood apple. There they passed through the regions of cloudy hills and skies and reached the surface of the earth, consisting the tracts of land and basins of water. They came to the continent of Jambu, situated amid the ninefold petals of the other continents, and from there they proceeded to the territories of Leela's husband in the land of Bharat. During this time, they saw a certain prince, the ruler of Sindh, strengthened by other chiefs, making an attack on this land which was the beauty of the world. They saw the air crowded by the people of the three worlds who had assembled to see the conflict. They remained undaunted and saw the air crowded by aerial beings in groups like clouds. There were the spiritual masters, Siddhas, Charan and Sura demigods, celestial Gandharvas, supernatural Vidyadhars, and other celestials and Apsara nature spirits in large bodies. There were also Bhut and Pishach demons and Rakshas demons, cannibals, while female Vidyadhar were also Bhut and Pishach demons and Rakshas demon cannibals, while female Vidyadhar were flinging handfuls of flowers on the combatants like showers of rain. The evil spirit Vetal, Yaksh, and Kushmandas were looking at the battle with pleasure, taking the shelter of hills to avoid flying arrows and weapons. The imps were flying from the air to keep out the path of flying weapons. The spectators were excited by sounds of the combatants' war cries. Leela, who was standing by with a fan in her hand, was frightened at the imminent, dreadful conflict. She smiled in scorn at the boasting of each on each side. Virtuous people, unable to endure the horrid sight, took to praying with the chief priest to avert the calamity. Indra's messengers were ready with their decorated elephants to bear the souls of mighty heroes to grace the seats of heaven. The demigod Charans and Gandharvas sang praises of the advancing heroes. Those heavenly Apsara nymphs who liked heroines were glancing at the best combatants, voluptuous women wished to embrace the arms of the brave. The fair fame of the hero had turned the hot sunshine to cool moonlight. Ram asked, "Tell me, sage, what sort of a warrior is called a hero and becomes a jewel in heaven, and who is an insurgent?" Vasishtha answered, "He who engages in lawful warfare and fights for his king, whether he dies or becomes victorious in the field, is called a hero and goes to heaven. Whoever otherwise kills men in war for an unjust cause and dies is called an insurgent and goes to hell. Whoever fights for unlawful property and dies in battle becomes subject to everlasting hellfire. Whoever wages a war justified by law and custom, that warrior is called both loyal and heroic indeed. Whoever dies in war with a willing mind to protect cattle, Brahman, and friends, and whoever protects his guest and refugees with all diligence, after his death he truly becomes an ornament in heaven. The king who is steadfast protecting his subjects and his own country is called just, and those who die in this cause are called brave. They who die fighting on the side of righteous subjects, or in the cause of rebellious princes or chiefs are doomed to fire. They who die fighting unjustly against their kings, lawgivers, and rulers are subjected to the torments of hell. A war that is just serves to establish order, but the unsteady, who are mindless of the future, destroy all order. The hero dying goes to heaven is the common saying. Scriptures call the lawful warriors a hero and others not otherwise. They who suffer wounds while protecting the righteous and good are said to be heroes, otherwise they are insurgents. It was in expectation of seeing such heroes that the maidens of the gods were standing in the air and talking among themselves about becoming the wives of such warriors. The air was decorated by an illumination of on high and by rows of beautiful heavenly cars of gods and masters, and by the presence of celestial maidens who sang in sweet notes and decorated their hair with mandara flowers. With this, chapter 31 also ends, and we will take another chapter 32, which is a very short chapter, and then we will end the readout session of today's. In chapter 32, Onset of the War, Vashishtha said, Leela, standing in air with the goddess of wisdom, saw the Apsara nymphs dancing with eagerness for the war between combatants below. She saw the armies assemble in her own territory once governed by her lord. She saw the field of the air no less formidable because of the assembled hosts. The meeting of the two armies made the ground appear like a billowy sea, or like two clouds meeting in the sky with the appearance of two hostile forces. The battle array of armored warriors, flashing like the fire of heaven, was followed by their commingled blows resembling the rattling of thunder above, deafening the ears and dazzling the sight. Then darts and javelins, spears and lances, and many other missiles began to fall on both sides, like showers of raindrops, hailstones, and meteorites from the skies. Showers of shafts fell with a force that would pierce the wings of Garud as they hit the warriors. They covered the glare of the sun of their armor. Combatants stood face to face with their arms lifted steadily, staring at each other as if they were pictures in a painting. Armies arranged in long regiments, standing in lines opposite each other, repeatedly shouted and answered each other. The battle array of both armies and the drums on each side were stopped by their leaders' warnings against striking the first blow. The space that separated the hostile forces was the breadth of the two bows. Like a bridge from one another, it looked like a gap caused by winds in the middle of the ocean at the universal deluge. Leaders were drawn in thoughts of fear of bloodshed and massacre. Cowardly soldiers groaned in their hearts with the hoarse noise of croaking frogs. There were many brave ones eager to yield their precious lives in a trice. Archers stood with bowstrings down to the ear, ready to let their pointed arrows loose at the foe. Others stood dreadfully fixed to strike their arms upon the enemy. Many, with frowning looks, stared sternly at the adversaries. Was clashing. The faces of killers were burning with rage, and the faces of cowards turned towards sheltered retreats ready for flight. All stood in doubt of their lives until the end of the war, and the bodies of old men, like big elephants, were covered with goosebumps. The silence in anticipation of the first blow resembled the calm of the stormy main or the deep sleep of a city at the dead of night. Musical instruments, drums, and conch shells were all silent, and a thick cloud of dust covered the face of the earth and sky. The retreaters were flying from their stronger assailants, who kept running after them like sharks after shoals of a fish in the sea. The glittering fringes of flags put the ethereal stars to blush, and the lifted gods in the hands of the elephant drivers made a forest of tapering trees in the sky. Arrows flew in the air like flocks of the winged tribe, and the loud beating of drums and blowing of pipes resounded in the air. A round phalanx attacked a host of wicked demons, and a squadron in Garud formation of right and left wings attacked a body of elephants. Somewhere a great howling arose from the vanguard of body of troops thrown into disorder by a cohort in the form of eagles. In another place, many were seen shouting and attacking each other. Warriors of many legions raised a tremendous noise, and the hands of combatants raised a host of large clubs. The glare of dark steel shaded sunbeams like a cloud. Darts hissing in the air resembled the rustling of breeze amidst the dry leaves of trees. Now began the main battle, like the dashing of clouds upon clouds at the end of Kalpej. War raged like sea whipped by a hurricane. Big elephants fell in the field like coal black rocks hurled down by gusts of wind. It seemed like infernal spirits had been let loose from their graves of hell to rage in the battlefield with their horrid and dismal figures. The dark cloud of swords hid daylight, and warriors raised their black spears, seemingly bent upon covering the earth into an ocean of bloodshed. With this, chapter 31 also ends. This is the end of chapter 32, in fact. And we stop the reading session here itself. Shivam friends, by the grace of Lord Ram, we will meet tomorrow again.